I work with patients sometimes designing and conducting self-tracking experiments, but I'm really just doing a classic, what did I do? For about the last 6 weeks of a single set of experiments that I did. I assessed my current health status. I identified some areas for improvement. And the first thing I noticed was that I had recently put on 7 pounds in about 2 months, between June and August. I went from about 165 to 172, and I looked back at old journals, and I was 155 in 2006. So I was like, wow. I also identified that I have long-standing headaches, and over the last year, they've gotten gradually more frequent. And there have been a lot of changes, and I just didn't know why that was. So I wanted to see if I could improve my weight situation and also kind of figure out headaches. So it was both a problem to solve and a question to answer. So I looked back, and actually the last labs I had were 2006, and they were actually, these are lipid panels and subtyping, and it was actually pretty favorable. My LDL was low, and then right before I started my experiment, I actually failed to get repeat labs, and I'll talk about that more later. I think baseline labs are often, and baseline data in general is often not gathered, then you don't really know what you did. So as part of an experiment that we were doing with a bunch of people, with about 10 people, I consulted Ann Wright, who's at Carnegie Mellon, as a quant coach. She also coached 9 other volunteers. We got very specific about my terms and what I wanted to do. So first of all, I implemented something called a paleo diet, slightly modified, basically cutting out all grains, sugar, legumes, and most fruit. And for social reasons, I decided on that particular diet. But I really wanted to know, is this safe? Is my cholesterol going to go to infinity? Am I going to drop dead? You know, I mean, it goes against every piece of medical training, both conventional and integrative, and I worked for Andrew Weil, and this is just absolutely opposite, you know, the meat, high-fat diet. So I tracked my weight and my blood pressure, and I tracked my lipids monthly. It was only 6 weeks, so I only got 2 data points. And I took pictures of my food. I tracked carb intake and my caffeine with a self-tracking app. And I wanted to find out, is it diet, is it stress, is it sleep, is it barometric pressure? What is causing these headaches? I've had headaches for 25 years, and I really don't know. I have some ideas, so I had some ideas. And I used an app on my iPad that I'm helping Thomas Christensen to develop called MyMe. He's a genius, and he set up customized buttons to track pictures of food and people and mood and optimism and agitation and my energy level, my headaches. And I also tracked my sleep with a Zeo. I tracked my environment. I had a sensor here that Ann Wright built to track barometric pressure and small and large air particulates and light in my bedroom. And then I tracked my activity with a body media armband, and also a couple of fitness Runkeeper and a Garmin watch to track my runs. So I gathered almost too much data, but I was very motivated, so I thought, why not? So what happened? What happened was I got some interesting results. And this is not medical advice, this is just my own experience. I self-actively put in 1,300 data points, actually more than that, between August 19th and October 11th. No push notifications. This is solely me thinking, oh, I'm going to enter some data now. I took pictures of my food, and this is an app called BodyTrack. It's a data platform built by the BodyTrack project at Carnegie Mellon. I have pictures of food and people, and I'm looking at my subjective data here entered with the MyMe app. Headaches are red, and blue is carbs, and this is the Zeo sleep data and the body media activity data, and we're able to pull it all into one database on one timeline and visualize it and zoom in and zoom out and add different, and I have a bunch of other things that we can pull in. I just can only show so much of one picture. This is my weight from June. It actually went up to 172 in August, and then currently I'm about 158. So from about 172 to 158 in about 6 weeks. And my labs, actually, the first labs I got were about a week in, and my LDL cholesterol went way up, and my triglycerides went up by about 50%. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm going to drop dead. Let's go back. But then about a week ago, I checked, a month after that collapse, my LDL is actually coming down again, and my HDL just continues to skyrocket. The good cholesterol's gone from like 50s to 71. My triglycerides came back down, my VLDL3 came down. So well, we'll see next month whether it really is real or not. The key point was get baseline data before you change anything. Because I have a little question about whether my cholesterol had naturally gone up to 160 or whether it was actually just an initiation effect of eating 60% of my calories from fat. And the other thing I learned was the paleo diet seems to be safe, but 6 weeks in, I'm going to do this for at least 6 months, and then I'll really judge. I'll come back and talk about it. The second was a Quant coach was very helpful. Tracking mood, which I'm not going to really talk about here, but I really broke it down into optimism, agitation, and energy, instead of just mood. And that really helped me to break down, and I chose my scales from 0 to 4. I tracked a lot of subjective data, I took pictures, and I found that actually entering my own data and tracking the subjective things added a lot of meaning and made it much of a more personal experience instead of just passive data collection. And also this active data entry made me much more mindful of what is going on in my own body and what am I feeling. I actually found myself spontaneously thinking, oh, how do I feel? Am I agitated? Am I hungry? Am I having headaches? And so it was really mindful. It generated a lot of mindfulness that I didn't expect. As far as my headaches, carbs, mood, barometric pressure didn't pan out. But I worked a lot of hospital night shifts. I lose a night of sleep about every 2 weeks. And sleep seemed to be a real big thing. Can we go back? I'm sorry. And the thing that actually came out to be most interesting was when I noticed myself dozing off during activity, like reading or on the computer, I often will doze off. If I ignore that, then the next day I seem to get headaches. And I figured this out about halfway in and started tracking eyes closed. So whenever I noticed myself dozing off, so here, I noticed my eyes closed. And then I went out to a dinner event, and then I went to bed later and I got a bunch of headaches. Here, I actually noticed my eyes closed and went right to sleep, and I didn't get headaches. And I've got a few weeks of data of this, and it seems to pan out. We'll see. And so the key features of a data platform, BodyTrack is open source. I control my data. It's completely private. And it's device agnostic. I can pull data in from anything that can generate JSON or CSV or any sort of timestamp data. So we're really trying to flesh out what is the role of a doctor in this, what's the role of a coach in this, how can self-tracking be used to gain mindfulness, and we're doing more demonstration projects. So give me a card if you might want to be a part of them. Cool.
About 7 minutes for questions. Over here, please.
Yeah. Question and a comment. The question is, if your exercise, is that continuous?
Interesting. The answer is no. On September 3rd, I sprained my ankle, and I essentially did no exercise between September 3rd and near the end of September. So right in the middle of it, for like almost 4 weeks in the middle of this, I did almost no exercise.
The one comment I would make is, as far as the paleo diet being, if you're on, I mean, you're the doctor, so if you're on any diet, frankly, all sorts of great things happen to your body. You lose some weight, but once you level off, it's really interesting to watch. So because then the macronutrients aren't all being burned off where they're being stored and what's going on with them. So
we'll see. I'm going to do it for 6 months.
If you stabilize, then it'll be interesting to see what cholesterol and things like that.
Well, if I don't stabilize them, then you're really scary.
You know what I mean?
But yes,
by that point for a period of time.
But I was really worried that things were going to go haywire under the surface as I lost weight, and they didn't go completely haywire. But we'll see. I'll let you know.
Go here.
So, speaking of going haywire, I would be very concerned about the LDL-HDL ratios because your LDL was going up significantly more than your HDL.
Well, my LDL then came down.
But not.
Well, I didn't.
The ratio scared me.
I don't believe in ratios as a physician. I think LDL and HDL are independently related to your risk. I don't think the ratio really has any relevance actually to your actual risk. But my HDL went from 57 to 71, and the LDL went up. I have a feeling it's coming down. Is my guess, is that it's going to continue to come down to where it should be. But still, a ratio of 71 to 130 is not pretty good.
Well, given that 1-to-1 is better, that's dramatically off of that. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, well, if you want to be off, yeah. So, I mean, I used to have one-to-one.
Mine's one-to-one.
Sure, but I'm only 6 weeks.
No. I'm just asking if it isn't scary that one is going off in a direction that's not necessary. Even though it came back down some.
Well, I don't know whether it was going off or whether it was already off, because it was 5 years between measurements. Yeah.
Misha?
What was it seemed like there, like when you were starting the presentation, you're like, and I'm tracking this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
It was like something that fired you up, right? Something that made you like, it seemed like something that got you excited to start tracking.
Well,
Yes.
I've done various tracking for 30 years. This is just like I was very, I was running a demonstration on it.
Okay.
So.
And so do you feel like, because you're doing all this, like so much of it is manual entry, do you feel that your enthusiasm is the same as the day you started it? Are you more enthusiastic now to get it in on a daily basis or less?
More. I think the fact that I'm just paying attention more has been the most valuable thing to me out of this. I think the active entry was the best part of the whole experiment.
Karen?
So, I guess I'd love to just hear a little more about you. What do you see as the role of the quant doctor and the quant coach in this movement?
We're working on that.
So the question was, what's the role of the quant doctor and the quant coach?
I think the quant coach is the most clear role of someone to help ask the right questions and narrow things down and get things really specific and help you actually design experiments and not just willy-nilly collect data that leads to data overload. And then get feedback and iterate. That really was very helpful. The role of the physician is mostly if you have some health risk or health situation, you need some monitoring and oversight and maybe more experimental design. And that is where that's most useful.
Yeah.
I just was curious about how long it took during your active tracking that you felt the buy-in, that it was actually added extra value process.
Well, I was able to look at my data in real time, throughout. So it was pretty early on that it was clearly.
Did you notice the benefit of putting in your own data?
Yeah. Well, no, it was really early. It was pretty immediately reporting. To be able to see my data in such detail and in relation, everything in relationship to everything else was really amazing.
And your level of honesty.
It is because I'm the only one looking at this data.
Okay.
There's no social. I shared it with my coach. I shared it with some other people selectively, but really, I think having it be my data was critical to the honesty issue. And I freely took pictures of things that I would not share. And so, but most of it, yeah.
So it's interesting that the most kind of rewarding thing, or the thing most impactful was manual entry of data. Is that what you said?
And it was really easy to do, but it was made, but it took.
So that to me creates a really interesting issue because most people won't be nearly as motivated to like manually enter stuff. It's like make it automatic, right? So I'm just wondering.
It depends on what your goals are. If it works for you, great. If not, then do something else. I mean, this is just my personal story. I'm not trying to put this out there to involve anyone else. Yeah.
Robin, last question.
So you said the role of coach is to help you kind of formulate an experiment, and that means you must have had something in mind, right? Because if I go to a coach and I have to ask them something for them to help. So I'm just wondering what was it you said to that she helped to give her a starting point.
She actually helped me figure out which questions to look at. I had a whole list of things I thought might be interesting, and then we wrote it down and figured out what was most likely to be able to get something interesting in 6 weeks.
So you would,
Yeah.
you had a list of questions and you wanted to find out of those questions which ones were practical for you to.
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to ask 10 questions,
Right.
and she convinced me to do 2.
Right.
And that was probably the most valuable thing. But then she also said, well, what do you really mean by that? And what do you really want, how can we formulate that? And forced me to really articulate what I was trying to measure and change. And that was very helpful. And then we met weekly, and how's it going? What's it going? Let's look at the data. And it really helped to change in mid-course as well.
Can you share what the articulation of the questions was, the 2 questions?
Well, it was more about what am I going to, the biggest thing was actually what buttons am I going to put on that app to track headache, and what are the ranges of 0 to 4, 0 to 2, 1 to 6, and how do you track mood? Mood didn't wind up sort of being that interesting in these questions, but how do you, what specific terms are we going to, what's the vocabulary, how to make it really tangible and more likely to get some signal out of the noise. And so, and she hadn't really, it's new to her too, so we're all working together to try to figure out what it's going to do. Yeah.
Very last fast question.
Quick question. Did you ever consider tracking liquid intake separately?
I thought about it, but I just couldn't.
Given that there are some doctors claiming that 80% of headaches come from dehydration.
Yeah. I sort of paid attention on my own and decided it probably wasn't a high yield item for me. But Thomas Christensen tracks his water intake, the author of Miami, very successfully with his, I just didn't choose that measure. I had too many buttons as it was. They wanted me to have like 6 buttons, and I wound up having 11. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much.